I analyzed over 100 replays of Faker's games and discovered a secret technique that he uses to stomp solo queue. I was then sent into the depraved depths of low elo North American ranked games to test this strategy to see if they work for us regular mortals playing with bad teammates. On top of that, I was not allowed to just spam games and cherry pick the ones where the strategy worked. All the replays of mine that you're going to see in this guide were from the first 6 games I played. This way, it makes sure that what you're about to learn is not only consistently effective, but also it shows that this strategy will be easy to execute without having to spend hundreds of games to master. Spoiler alert, I won every game. This technique is overpowered and Faker is a god. So what is this secret strategy Faker uses? Well, it's what I like to call the Smother technique. Tell me if this problem doesn't sound like something you've gone through many times before. At some point in your games, you'll be stronger than the opposing laner. Maybe they're low on health or you have an item or level lead, but the problem is they just play very safe at their tower and you're not so far ahead that you can just straight up tower dive them. What exactly are you supposed to do in these scenarios? Should you just repeatedly push waves into their tower and then roam? Or maybe just push into then recalling instead? Or maybe you just force the tower dive anyways? How exactly do you convert a small lead in lane into a bigger game-winning advantage? Well, the answer is none of the things I just told you. You see, the biggest mistake you and every other player is making is forcing a play that's not there. For example, if you force a roam that doesn't work, that will let the opponents push the next wave, denying you all that CS and giving them a recall timing to get back to full health or catch up on items. If you just push and recall, the enemy will clean up the wave at the tower, then match your recall, no advantage gained. And if you force a tower dive that isn't there, well, you just threw your entire lane. So this seems like an impossible problem, right? Like no matter what you do, the enemy gets to neutralize your advantage and just recover. And again, I want to emphasize, this is one of the biggest reasons why you're stuck at your current rank. The best players like Faker know that in order to climb the ranked ladder, it's not enough to just go even or generate small leads, you often need to crush your opponent. And this is exactly what Faker's Smother technique will accomplish. And the best part is this technique is very simple to understand and execute. Whenever you have an advantage over the opponent, such as them being low in health, out of mana, behind in items, and you can't kill them for whatever reason, your goal should then be to just prevent the enemy from recalling and keep them in lane in their losing position as long as possible. This is because when an enemy is significantly weaker than you, whether it's because of this low health or mana, level or item differences, it means they will always impact any nearby fight that breaks out significantly less than you can. But enough theory about this strategy. Let's actually jump into a real game Faker played where he shows this strategy in action. Here he's playing Gragas and is facing an Aurelia. He's currently ahead 1 level, 1000 gold of items, and Aurelia is low on health. The problem is Faker is currently low on mana, and so there's no way to just straight up solo kill Aurelia at this moment. At the same time, you can see that the enemy Aurelia is playing very far back and safe, forcing Faker to tower dive if he wants to get that kill. And you now know our main goal is to prevent the enemy from recalling and keep them in lane, which we'll go into more depth on shortly. However, the first step to mastering this strategy involves you understanding why the opponent can't just recall in these types of positions. If an enemy does recall, well, then you need to punish them by pushing a wave into the tower and deny the enemy all that golden XP from the minions. For example, you can see here Aurelia disappears into Fog of War. Faker is now worried that she's recalling and so then looks to push in order to punish her recall. You can actually see how this forces Aurelia to stop her recall so she doesn't lose those minions to the tower. So you need to understand this. The threat of you pushing the wave into the tower is what punishes and often prevents an enemy from just recalling in a losing position. The thing is, if you're pushing, well, you're going to be much further up the lane and vulnerable to being ganked. And this is actually a good thing. Again, as a reminder, in this position, if a fight breaks out anywhere on the map, Faker will always get there first while also being able to impact the outcome of the fight significantly more. But most often, there will be no fights on the map or opportunities for you, just like in this case. So instead, by being this pushed up, you can actually lure junglers to try and gank you to relieve pressure on their losing lane. This is exactly what Faker wants and what you should want in your own games. Because if a jungler ganks Faker here, he'll simply turn on Aurelia to kill her and at worst, trade 1 for 1. Or the jungler will be forced into a 1v1 with Faker since Aurelia can't jump in without dying. On top of all of that, the enemy jungler still has to be worried about a counter gank which would completely crush them. So at this point, it's a losing position for the enemy. If they stay in lane, they either continually get zoned from last hits, losing gold, or get harassed down low enough to be killed through a tower dive. Or eventually a fight will break out somewhere they can't respond to without dying, or a roam opportunity will open up for the opposing player. So when you're in this position, the biggest key is to be patient, do as Faker does, and use the Smother technique. You want to prolong the enemy's suffering for as long as possible while patiently waiting for an easy play to present itself to you. This is because the only way out of this position to lose the least amount possible is to do what you see this Aurelia does. You just recall. The problem is, that means you'll usually lose 2 waves of farm. That's nearly a kill's worth of gold. Now listen up, because when you apply the Smother technique, it's extremely important that if the enemy does choose to recall, you not only push that final wave to punish them, but also then match the opponent's recall. By pushing, you not only deny them farm to the tower, but just as important is by matching their recall, you prevent the enemy from spending their gold and getting back full resources, which will give them a temporary lead on you when they come back to lane if you don't recall yourself.
Alright, so you should now have a good idea of the basic theory behind this strategy. Up next, you'll be put through a test to see if you truly understand it. Before we do that though, I just want to mention guides like this are only possible because of our awesome subscribers at skillkept.com. It's there, you'll find premium courses for every role and skill that are taught by the best players. It's why Skillkept is the perfect platform to help take your game to the next level. We also release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries every week where a challenger teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All of this seemed too good to be true? Well, don't worry, we're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillkept, then you'll get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Get the rank you've always wanted and click the link in the description below.
Here, Faker is on Zed, facing a Cassante. He gets a gank from his teammates that puts Cassante low on health and his flash on cooldown. As we get back to this wave, we can see Cassante is missing from vision. So if we're Faker, what should be our next move in this scenario? We should be pushing out the lane. We have to assume that Cassante is trying to recall since he's low on health and isn't showing in vision, and pushing this wave into his tower is how we punish him for recalling. After pushing, Faker then begins channeling his own recall as we taught you, but then we see Cassante picking up the wave at his tower, meaning he didn't recall after all. So should we continue recalling or cancel it? We should cancel it, as we want to keep Cassante in lane as we have the advantage. If we recall, it will always allow Cassante to shove out the next wave and recall after, giving him a way back into the game. You can see just how much map pressure you get with this technique. Cassante is literally pinned to his tower, unable to help with anything, while Faker is making it safe for his team to invade the enemy's jungle. The next wave arrives, and Cassante is nowhere to be seen. So what should be our next move in this scenario? Again, we always have to assume that they're recalling, and our punish is to push the wave into the tower. We then see the enemy's jungler, Nico, is at the tower, meaning Cassante definitely committed to recalling. So with that in mind, what should be our next move? We always need to recall after we push in order to match the opponent's recall. This avoids Cassante showing up back in lane with a health and item advantage over us. Alright, so now you should have a grasp on the basics of this technique, but we haven't even got to the best part. The best part about the Smother technique is that you can literally use it at any phase of the game. For example, here it's later in the game and Faker is in a side lane as Gragas, as his bot lane has taken over mid lane. These are very common lane assignments as the game progresses. Now, he did beat Aurelia in lane and is ahead in CS, kills, and a level, but not ahead enough to just straight up tower dive Aurelia 1v1. And of course, the problem is, Aurelia knows just that, and so is playing super safe just sitting at her tower. Again, this is when the Smother technique will come in handy. If we look topside at this moment, we can literally see 3 enemy members ganking his top lane. It's very common in these positions to feel the pressure to have to do something, like you have to force a play to match the opponent or the game will start slipping away. But again, forcing plays that aren't there is the biggest reason why you're stuck in your rank. As long as we keep the enemy pinned at the tower, we can just patiently wait for an obvious winning play to react to first. In this case, it means we need to support our jungler taking Dragon. Then, once we get back to lane, Aurelia is just playing safe under her tower. We can't forcibly push our lead. Instead, by pushing the minions, it forces Aurelia to react and be pinned to the tower to farm that wave, or lose it and the tower along with it. We actually mentioned the importance of this concept during the laning phase as a way to prevent the enemy from recalling. However, as the game progresses, the reason we push and pin the opponent isn't just to prevent a recall. You see, if Faker were to freeze in this position, Aurelia could just always leave lane and start roaming to try and impact the map in an effort to get back into the game. So by pushing, we actually prevent this from happening and pin them to the tower. So as we push this wave, again, we take a look to see if there's an obvious play for us to rotate to. And just like the majority of the time, there isn't a play for us. Instead, in this case, the play actually comes to us in the form of our jungler looking to tower dive. This sets up a super easy kill for Faker. It then results in Aurelia being denied a ton of farm to the tower, Faker taking plates, and the turret. This actually totaled over 1,000 gold gained for Faker in this one single play. But I know, you're already thinking, yeah, this won't work in my rank. My jungler would never tower dive for me. Well, don't worry, as remember, very shortly I'll show you my results of using this in lower elo. But at the same time, this wasn't completely honest. I didn't actually show you the the full clip. So if we go further back, we can actually see Faker teleported to bot lane, which initiated the lane swap. And after a bit of fighting, you can see how he has a health, mana, level, and item advantage on their bot lane. Again, we know to push to prevent them from recalling and forcing them to react to the wave. The problem is, we can't tower dive as Fiddlesticks is threatening to defend with an ultimate. So we just keep them pinned and use the Smother technique. Next wave, we lose vision of the bot lane, so we push to punish and force them to stay. At this point, it's very clear bot lane committed to the recall, so we stay to take plates. No one comes to defend, and so we deny farm and get ahead in gold. We push the next wave, again, no one is responding, and there's nothing for us to react to on the map. Next wave arrives, we push it into the tower, and finally, Aurelia responds to come defend. It was at this point Faker rotated to help take the dragon. We then push the next wave, and it's only now an easy play opens up for us in the form of our jungler tower diving. What this means is that if we go back, it was around the 11-minute mark we started to implement the Smother technique, and it wasn't until around 2 minutes and 30 seconds later an obvious play opened up. This is what I mean when I say you have to be patient with this technique. You can't just get paid off as soon as you try to implement it. It's all about forcing the opponent into a lose-lose scenario. You're either going to gain map pressure that eventually turns into a winning play, or they're forced to take a bad recall where you deny them a ton of minions to the tower. Now, of course, just because Faker uses a strategy in Korean Challenger doesn't mean it's automatically going to work for a regular player in lower ranks. So that's why I went out and tested the Smother technique in ranks gold to platinum. Why gold to platinum though? Well, literally 96% of the entire ranked player base is platinum or lower, so it's the best representation of what you're going to experience in your own games. And remember, I didn't just spam games and cherry pick the ones that worked. All replays of mine that you're going to see were the first 6 games I played. So for this first replay I want to go over, I'm in lane against a Galio, and I'm currently ahead of level and have double buffs. I look to push to pin the opponent down, but this also sets me up to land damage while they try to farm under tower to help push my lead further. We actually saw the same concept being used in the first game of Faker, where he was poking Aurelia down under tower after he pushed a wave. Next wave arrives, you know the plan, we want to push to prevent them from recalling. And again, I'm landing poke as I do this, continuing to build my lead. And as I push the next wave, remember, at this point, if I'm ganked, I can either just turn on the jungler, escape, or turn on Galio if he tries to escape. At the same time, if any play happens on the map, I can react to it first and be more impactful. Now, after I push this next wave into the tower, I want to highlight how I have a flash up in all of my abilities, including ultimate. Galio is definitely within my kill threshold here, and so I could go for a charm flash combo to solo kill him. However, there's no need for me to force anything risky when I'm in such a dominant position. I want to be patient and just smother the opponent. And based on the replays we watched earlier of Faker, I was actually fully expecting for Galio to do what Aurelia did, just back off and recall. Take the L, at which point I'd punish him by shoving a wave into the tower and then matching his recall. Instead, they surprised me by going for this hero all-in to get themselves out of the spot, which just simply would never work. But this was actually a huge lesson for me. When you watch this technique being used in Korean Challenger, naturally, there aren't many big mistakes like this. But in lower ranks, your opponent won't know how to react to this technique, so they often just force really bad plays trying to get out of it. For example, here I'm playing as Ahri against Veigar. I teleport back to lane and find myself in a really nice advantage, where Veigar is low on health, mana, and hasn't spent his gold on items like I have. So I immediately recognize I need to implement the Smother technique to either prevent him from recalling or punish him if he does recall. However, I want to highlight a nuanced trick that is super useful. Notice how I land one more Q on the wave and then I stop hard pushing the wave and instead primarily just last it. This is because Veigar isn't walking away from the lane into Fog of War and threatening to recall. So when an opponent plays like this and is just showing they're not recalling, you want to damage the wave enough so that it begins pushing, but then switch to slow pushing so you can prolong the amount of time they have to stay in lane. You can see how by doing this, it allows me to bait Veigar to move further up the lane to last it, at which point I land a charm and get his flash. After this, Veigar has now disappeared into Fog of War. This is when I know I need to push fast now to punish him if he's recalling and try to bait him into staying. And unfortunately for Veigar, he has decided to stay, which again is a huge mistake. He's way too low on health, and again, just like we saw Aurelia do in the Faker replay, he needs to recall and take the L, but instead is making the same mistake we saw Galio make, trying to stay. Surprisingly, I actually got a tower dive from my jungler. This is in high gold, low platinum after all, and so now Veigar not only dies, but still loses the minions on top of it. I want to emphasize though, this tower dive is not needed. It's a lose-lose position for Veigar. If we go back to when the wave crashes, we'll either solo kill him by landing a charm or getting him lower and lower on health from harass. Or we'll just be able to react to a play on the map that he can't, or he finally accepts that he has to recall and we deny a wave or two to the tower. To actually prove this, if we fast forward a bit, obviously from the earlier play, I'm now ahead on Veigar. Because of this, I start pushing him to pin him down. I look to land poke while he's distracted with the last hits under tower in an effort to then further snowball. Next wave arrives, again push it to smother the opponent, and I actually spot a fight happening topside, and so I use my lane priority to react to it first. In this case, the fight was resolved very fast, and so they didn't need my help anymore. But you can see how if this wasn't the case, I'd be able to clean up the fight while FAKER couldn't contribute anything. So I turn around and head back to lane. Again, pushing the wave, landing more and more damage on FAKER. He then disappears into Fog of War, and I have to assume he's recalling, so we're forced to push this wave to punish him. FAKER then doesn't show, so it's clear that he has committed to his recall, and so again, like we taught you, I know to match his recall so he doesn't show up with more health, mana, and a possible item advantage on me. The problem is, in this case, FAKER has teleport, meaning he's not going to lose any minions to the tower. And with how popular teleport is right now, it's actually quite common for this to happen. But the thing is, since I pushed the wave first and then recalled, I can still just walk back to lane in time to pick up the next wave without losing any farm. This means, yes, I didn't deny him minions, but I put his teleport on cooldown. Meanwhile, my teleport is still up. That's a huge advantage that was created from the Smother technique. Next wave is arriving, and of course, with my lead, I'm going to push to Smother FAKER. I didn't realize this until looking at the replay, but this FAKER has actually been spam pinging his jungler ever since that first tower dive. And I actually catch him out here, just standing still, clearly typing flaming his jungler to land an easy trade. The reason I mention this is that this technique is extremely stressful to be the victim of. It just feels like you're being slowly strangled with no counterplay, and so players often get extremely frustrated when playing against it. Now, as I crash this wave, I believe this to be a pretty big mistake that you guys can learn from. Instead of just maintaining this pressure and let it build, I look for a big play by landing a charm under tower. But this only results in me taking a ton of tower damage and basically trading even. This was just an unnecessary risk, and you can see how if an enemy ganked me, I could easily end up losing my lead. You can also see how I was then forced into trying to make a charm flash play after, as I realized I was going to lose the sustain war if I stayed in lane. I basically just got super lucky and I'm bailed out by my jungler, which makes it look like I used the Smother technique successfully to set like all of this up. And the reason I'm highlighting all of this is to show you not to get too wrapped up in results-oriented thinking. In reality, I made a mistake when I went for that charm under tower, which easily could have resulted in me dying if I didn't get lucky by having a better jungler. So make sure you don't fall into that trap. Try to analyze whether your decisions increase the probability of something good to happen, instead of just determining whether something was the right choice based on the outcome. Alright, now I'm in the next game. I'm Ahri against a Anivia. Things are relatively even until I was able to land a charm to get a big winning trade. Obviously now I know to default into smothering. I'd look to maintain the push to prevent or punish a recall. And as we taught you earlier, pushing means you will be attracting more attention to your lane. However, I'm full health, I have flash up, and Anivia is very low in health, making it difficult for her to just walk up to try and set up a gank. So when Evelynn shows up, I'm easily able to just walk away from it with very little threat. Then once she leaves, I'm again right back into smothering, at which point Evelynn then shows up again, trying to gank to relieve the pressure. This is another super advantageous outcome. You're completely wasting the enemy jungler's time, having them fall behind in farm, preventing them from a successful gank on any of your teammates, and revealing them on the map. Alright, so what was the outcome of using the Smother technique in lower ranked games? Well, it had a very significant positive impact in 3 out of the 6 games I played. On top of that, I found it was actually far more effective in these lower ranks, since players didn't know how to react and would constantly make it even worse for themselves by forcing a mistake instead of simply recalling and losing a wave or two. I was also pleasantly surprised at how often my own jungler would see my lane opponent was low and look to play off it in some way. However, if I'm being honest with you, I think the most valuable takeaway for you guys is about the mentality. Most players don't have a realistic expectation on how leads are pushed in League, specifically at how fast they happen. You often can't force things by yourself, and instead, you need to realize if you're in a winning position, it's often better to just prolong that winning position as long as possible until the opponent makes an obvious mistake that's easy to capitalize on. And as we both saw in the Korean Challenger replays and in the low elo replays, this can mean staying in that winning position for minutes at a time until that opportunity presents itself. So the next time you find yourself in a winning position, instead of asking, what should I do next to push this lead further, instead ask, what can I do to maintain this advantage and prevent the opponent from resetting to neutral? Then, as you maintain that advantage, just patiently wait for a mistake by the opponent or an opportunity created by your teammates. It's often a far more effective approach to solo queue, as you minimize the risk of you throwing and forcing a play that isn't there.
Alright, there you go. You now have everything you need to use FAKER's Smother technique. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon if you want to see more pro analysis content like this. And for everything else you need to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, there's our website, skillcap.com. We're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillcapped, you'll get your money back, no questions asked. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. We here at Skillcapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.